IPE at WU Careers. You want to learn about jobs that combine politics and economics? Well, you're at the right place. Our students have collected questions for people with interesting jobs that combine politics and economics. Here are their answers to our questions.
This is Patricia. Patricia is a researcher at the Center for European Policy Studies. CEPS is a leading think tank and forum for debate on EU affairs. Patricia's research interests have revolved around interactions of socioeconomic and ecological systems. Her main expertise relates to the area of circular economy. She holds a bachelor's degree in cultural and social anthropology, as well as a journalism and communication studies. She obtained her master's at WU, where she studied socio-ecological economics and policy. Hello, Patricia. Thank you for being here today. Revolutionizing would like to know, why did you choose to pursue this career?
For me, it was quite obvious that I wanted to do research, and I'd previously been working at WU actually, and I wanted to do something that was more practically oriented with a wider policy impact than what I'd previously done, and to kind of interact with the whole EU policy stakeholders and audience.
I Heart Europe is wondering, at what point in your life did you decide to follow this career path? Was there a specific event that triggered this decision?
No, actually, it was more a combination of different coincidences and chances that I got in life. I was studying multiple things, and I was working at the Institute for Managing Sustainability. And I think I was always interested in different ecological and social debates. And I found this job through a colleague who recommended it. That's how I got there.
Question mark would be interested to hear, what kind of internship did you complete and how did you shape your CV for this position?
To be honest, I was quite lucky in that I didn't have to do a whole lot of internships. I did do an internship at Asylkoordination, which was very much focused on social topics rather than environmental ones. And I wrote for both Ökonews and the ÖH magazine Progress. What I think was really relevant was that when I started my master's, I also started working as a research assistant at the Institute for Managing Sustainability. And that is where I then stayed for a couple of years also after I'd finished my master's. And this, I think, was the relevant job experience that I really needed to further delve into research and think tank policy research.
SUVI student 1331 is curious. What was the application process like for this job?
Initially, it was quite standard application process. I needed to send in a CV and a few writing samples, so publications that I'd already written to kind of prove that I actually know how to write, which is kind of the central thing you need to do as a researcher. And then I needed a few contacts to name for my potential future bosses to call and verify whether I was actually going to be a reliable colleague or not. And then I was invited to the interview. And in addition to the interview, I had to do a personality test, which I found quite interesting, and also write a short policy discussion on a topic that they sent to me within an hour.
Broke and confused wants to learn. Did your studies at WU prepare you for your current career? If so, how?
I think my studies at WU prepared me in the sense that they gave me a very critical perspective on a range of socio-ecological and economic issues. And that they kind of showed me that it's important to find the interconnections between different areas of research, because the work that I'm doing right now is very multifaceted, and there is a lot of different projects I'm involved with, a lot of different research areas that I need to kind of understand rather quickly. So it has been very good that the CEPS Masters actually really delved into different areas that were relevant to the socio-ecological transformation. And in that sense, yes. In other areas, maybe not so much, because it is very practical. The work I'm doing right now, very much oriented towards specific sectors, for example, when it comes to circularity. Whereas my studies here were more theoretical, of course, and more the way you'd expect it to be for an academic sort of environment.
Inara is pondering, what skills are essential for your job and how might studying international political economy help me develop these skills?
So my unit does environmental research, so energy, resources, and climate change based topics. But you don't necessarily need to focus on these things. There are other units in a think tank usually that do research on different topics, right? So at CEPS, there is a unit working on financial markets and institutions. There is one on justice and home affairs, foreign policy, global governance and regulations. So essentially everything that is of relevance to the EU and the different policy areas today.
Question Mark wants to ask, have you always been interested and active in politics, or did that interest develop over time?
I would say that it developed over time. I did have a sort of sense for justice as a kid already, because I had smaller siblings that I wanted to take care of. But really becoming aware of feminism, of different inequalities that people are facing, that very much was a product of my teenage and adult years. And then when I studied social anthropology, that really kind of put the focus on these topics. And that's how I kind of ended up wanting to do research that also has an impact and that might also improve things across multiple areas.
Dönerpreisbremse wants to know, does greenwashing play a role in your job?
I wouldn't know how to greenwash my own activities as a researcher. My environmental footprint is rather minimal, I would say. It plays a role for sure in the research that I'm doing, looking into what policies might actually have an impact on reducing different ecological indicators, rather than just giving companies the easy way out of saying, well, I did my job, my activities are green. So in that sense, yes, I do research on areas that are interconnected to battling greenwashing.
Revolutionizing is wondering, what is the most frustrating part of your job and what is the most fulfilling?
I think that one of the most frustrating parts is that my personal research interests don't necessarily align with what the EU deems to be politically relevant at the moment, and therefore funding might also not be available for that. And one of the most fulfilling parts is that you actually see how people care about your research and that people read it and engage with it and come to events you organize, and it doesn't just disappear into the void, essentially.
Broke and Confused wants to find out, do you feel like your work is contributing meaningfully and can bring about change?
I think it is contributing meaningfully because it ties into the previous question. People do care about it, people do read it, different stakeholders, not just EU policymakers, but also people from NGOs or the industry actually engage with what we work on. Does it actually change things? That's very hard to measure, I think. Qualitatively, I would say you contribute to the debate by bringing in an independent voice into the multitude of different actors. Quantitatively, I have no way of measuring the success of my own research, I would say.
Revolutionizing would be interested to hear, are you able to act in accordance with your political beliefs, or do you have to make compromises?
I would say that I'm in a very luxurious position of very rarely having to make such compromises. It will always happen to a certain extent. But if you do research, that means the data don't lie, and that means you can use what you find objectively rather than having to sell something you don't actually believe in.
De La Font wants to ask, are you allowed to share all aspects of your work with your spouse?
Yes, broadly, the important ones. there are some privacy issues that, of course, I cannot disclose when for example, I interview companies about very sensitive things, then I could not disclose that. But the things that matter, yes.
Rooftop firefighter wants to learn. What is your salary?
My salary is, let's say, I wouldn't do that job for the money. It's broadly comparable to when you work in academia. So not very high, not very low, kind of an average salary with Belgian taxes, which are high.
Vivi is curious. Do you feel that being a woman made it more difficult to obtain your current position?
I think that being a woman, of course, in a patriarchal structure will always be more challenging than being a cis man. So yes, of course, it will have put some more challenges into my path than if I'd been born a cis man. But more concretely, I was lucky enough to actually not feel that being a woman significantly made it more difficult for me to work in these areas. I think it's also connected to the fact that I do research on social inequalities and ecological issues. And the people that also work in these fields are also very aware of things like gender. Actually, at CEPS, we have a diversity, equality, and inclusion committee who is precisely working on battling these gendered structures and also other forms of discrimination at the workplace. And in that sense, I'm very lucky.
Baloo123 would like to know, what is your experience like working as a woman in this field?
I think that women often struggle a lot with imposter syndrome. Of course, it's not just a gendered issue, but I do see that across a lot of female colleagues, this is a big issue. And then when you work a lot with industry, which is what I sometimes do, you can find that many research projects are very male-dominated, or many panels you go to. And that can sometimes make it a bit difficult to speak up and to trust yourself and that you know your facts and your research. So that is one challenge that I see even in a research field.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wants to learn. What advice would you give your younger self during your bachelor's degree?
I would say don't stress too much and don't try to plan everything, because things are going to happen that you couldn't have foreseen. And just do what you're passionate about. And if you're not passionate about your studies, then do something you find is interesting enough and trust that you will find something good.
Joe Biden Loves Ice Cream wants to ask, if you could start over, what would you do differently?
Since I'm quite happy where I ended up, despite it not being a very straightforward path, I wouldn't really do anything differently. I think maybe I'd try and enjoy studying more and focus more on the critical things and debates rather than the exams.
Mr. Marquez is pondering, which networks and internships would you recommend for entering similar fields?
So internship-wise, I haven't done a lot, so I don't really know the scene very well. I would recommend you to try and get into academia, maybe a research or teaching assistant position, simply because it will get you closer into the world of research. And that will be a more easier path to then go work in a think tank later on.
I Heart Europe wants to find out, do you envision yourself doing this job for the rest of your life?
So my job is very dynamic, very interesting, and a great fit for now. But I still very much hope that the rest of my life is a long, long time, and I would like to try out something new in the future. But for the time being, it's a great fit.
Thank you, Patricia.
Want more information? Visit the Institute for International Political Economy. You will find podcasts analyzing current events, TikTok videos defining key concepts, and courses explaining the world.